Are we living in a simulation? The question of whether we are living in a simulation has intrigued philosophers and scientists for centuries. The idea that our reality is nothing but a computer-generated simulation has been a popular topic of discussion, especially after the release of the movie The Matrix in 1999. The concept of a simulated reality raises a multitude of interesting philosophical and scientific questions, such as the nature of reality, the possibility of free will, and the limits of technology. In this video, we will explore the arguments for and against the simulation hypothesis and try to answer the question, are we living in a simulation? What is the simulation hypothesis? The simulation hypothesis posits that our reality is nothing but a computer simulation created by a technologically advanced civilization. This hypothesis is based on the assumption that if a civilization were to become technologically advanced enough, it would be able to create a simulation of a reality that is indistinguishable from the real thing. The simulation would be so advanced that the beings inside it would be unaware that they were living in a simulated reality. In other words, we could be living in a virtual reality without even realizing it. The simulation hypothesis is not a new concept. It has been discussed by philosophers and scientists for centuries. One of the earliest mentions of the idea can be found in the ancient Hindu scriptures, which describe the world as a maya, or illusion. In the 17th century, philosopher René Descartes proposed that the world was an illusion created by an evil demon. In the 20th century, the concept was popularized by science fiction writers such as Philip K. Dick and Stanislaw Lem. Arguments for the simulation hypothesis. There are several arguments that support the simulation hypothesis. Some of the most compelling arguments are: 1. The Fermi paradox. The Fermi paradox is the apparent contradiction between the high probability of the existence of extraterrestrial civilizations and the lack of evidence for their existence. According to the simulation hypothesis, the reason why we have not detected any signs of extraterrestrial life is that we are living in a simulation created by an advanced civilization. This civilization would have no need to create other civilizations in their simulation, as they could simply program them into existence. Therefore, the absence of evidence for extraterrestrial life could be evidence for the simulation hypothesis. 2. The simulation argument. The simulation argument, also known as the simulation theory, was proposed by philosopher Nick Bostrom in 2003. The argument is based on the idea that if a civilization were to become technologically advanced enough to create a simulation of reality, it would create many simulations. Therefore, the number of simulated realities would far outnumber the number of real realities. If we assume that a civilization like ours will eventually become technologically advanced enough to create a simulation of reality, then it is highly likely that we are living in a simulation. 3. The limits of physics. There are several physical limits that suggest that our reality could be a simulation. For example, the Planck length is the smallest possible length that can be observed in the universe. It is approximately 1.6 times 10 to the power of negative 35 meters. If our reality is a simulation, then there would be a limit to the resolution of the simulation, and the Planck length could be that limit. In addition, the speed of light is the maximum speed at which information can travel in our universe. If our reality is a simulation, then the speed of light could be the maximum speed at which information can be transmitted within the simulation. 4. The nature of consciousness. One of the most intriguing arguments for the simulation hypothesis is based on the nature of consciousness. It is unclear how consciousness arises from physical processes in the brain. Some scientists and philosophers argue that consciousness is a fundamental property of the universe, while others believe that consciousness emerges from complex computations. If consciousness does emerge from computations, then it is possible that our reality is a simulation. The beings in the simulation could be conscious, even though their consciousness is simply the result of the computations that govern the simulation. Arguments against the simulation hypothesis. While there are compelling arguments for the simulation hypothesis, there are also several arguments against it. Some of the most significant arguments against the simulation hypothesis are: 1. Occam's razor. Occam's razor is a principle of logic that states that, all else being equal, the simplest explanation is usually the best. The simulation hypothesis is a complex explanation for the nature of reality, and it requires us to make several assumptions about the nature of advanced civilizations and their motivations for creating simulations. The simpler explanation is that our reality is real, and there is no need to invoke the existence of simulations. 2. The complexity of simulating reality. Simulating an entire reality is an incredibly complex task. It would require enormous amounts of computational power, as well as an understanding of the laws of physics that govern our universe. It is unclear whether any civilization could develop the technology necessary to simulate an entire reality, especially one as complex as our own. 3. The problem of consciousness. The simulation hypothesis raises difficult questions about the nature of consciousness. If we are living in a simulation, then what is the nature of our consciousness? Is it real, or is it simply a byproduct of the computations that govern the simulation? It is unclear how to answer these questions, and until we have a better understanding of the nature of consciousness, it is difficult to accept the simulation hypothesis. 4. The unlikelihood of a perfect simulation. Even if we assume that it is possible for a civilization to simulate an entire reality, it is unlikely that the simulation would be perfect. There would be imperfections and limitations in the simulation that would reveal its artificial nature. For example, the simulation would have to simulate every particle in the universe, and any errors or omissions would be immediately apparent to the beings in the simulation. Conclusion. The question of whether we are living in a simulation is a fascinating one that raises many philosophical and scientific questions. While there are arguments for and against the simulation hypothesis, it is important to remember that it is still just a hypothesis, and there is no conclusive evidence to support it. Until we have more information about the nature of reality, consciousness, and advanced civilizations, it is difficult to determine whether we are living in a simulation or not. In the meantime, we can continue to explore these questions and learn more about the nature of our universe.